Now, without further ado, let's welcome Eric Young, Education Manager at Good Roads, and Scott Provence, VP of Integrated Learning Services at ELB Learning. Scott, please share your screen and let's get this webinar started.
Let's do it. Well, thanks so much, Kristen. Thanks for getting all of this set up. And yeah, I know Eric and I are both excited to chat, and we'll make this, just like Kristen was mentioning, as interactive and conversational with the entire group as we can. So I know people are just starting to drop things into the chat, but please keep that going as we continue talking. Yes, this is being recorded. Great question from Don. Yeah, make sure that I don't want to put anyone on the spot with specific answers, but this is certainly a safe space in the sense that we want people to feel comfortable asking all those questions around AI, especially the ones like, I don't know this, or explain this to me like I've taken my first ever course in computer science. This is literally what I am asking all of my peers and subject matter experts on a daily basis, even though I've had my head buried in AI for a few years now. So again, yeah, glad to have everyone here. I know Kristen already mentioned this, but I'm Scott, and we've got Eric here, and so excited and grateful to have Eric to talk through some of the programs that he's worked his teams through, some of the takeaways, lessons learned, questions that's been raised, use cases. As you can see here, we've got some objectives, but I really am eager to add to this list. And if you've got specific questions that you came for, drop those in the chat. Think about the objectives. Think about what success would look like for you, taking away anything specific that you want from this hour, and put them in here, because we want to make sure you're getting the most out of this too. But we can talk through some key terms and concepts in the field of AI, some great examples from Eric on, again, how he's brought this into his programs, specifically upskilling, working through change management, how to foster that culture of innovation, especially when dealing with all of this new technology. And that's a lot of what we're hearing with all sorts of clients and peers that we're working with is, well, why does this matter? This is because everyone's talking about it, and there's a vast variety of differences in terms of comfort levels. And in fact, for those of you, just to kind of get our fingers warmed up and using the chat function as best we can, I would love if everyone is able to access that chat and make sure, like Kristen had mentioned, put this into everyone, or do the little drop-down menu so that you're chatting to everyone. I would love to hear, do a quick informal poll. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your level of comfort and knowledge in today's AI tools and environment? 1 being, I don't know what's out there right now at all, and I'm not at all comfortable. 10 being, I am completely comfortable. I know everything about every bit of the latest tools right now. And we've got a lot of votes coming in. I'm gonna put my own vote in here. Let's see. I think I'm at about a 5, maybe. So we've got everything from, we've got some experts in the room, very cool, some 7s and 8s. We've got some 2s. We've got a lot of 5s and 6s, 8s. We've got 4s. Yeah, 5. Yeah, this is great. So my guess would be this is a lot of what your teams are experiencing too. You probably have some innovators that are already out there and keeping abreast of the latest tools and technology. And you've got folks that are saying, I just want to stick my head in the sand. I don't want to think about these AI tools at all. And Eric, I'd love to kick things over to you and see if this represents kind of your team that you were as they were coming into AI and how you were experiencing this.
Yeah, I think our comfort levels changed as we learn more and more. I think at one point before we really dove into some of the training we've done with your organization, we might have considered ourselves 5s and 6s. Then we jumped into some of the training and we realized we were closer to 1s and 2s. As we go on, we're learning more and more, but we're also learning that there's so many others that are a lot of steps ahead of us. So I am using, or my team is using AI on a daily basis for a variety of things, but I don't know how to design a chatbot to interact with my learners using just AI and the content of my courses to work like a teacher's assistant. That's way above my current skill level, but there are people that are doing that easily at this point.
That's
So it
interesting.
definitely changes. Kind of the more you know, the less you know.
Yeah. Well, I love that point too, that one of the shifts that we might see is not necessarily going from beginner or intermediate to expert after a workshop or a series of workshops, but going from I thought I was okay into like, oh my gosh, there's so much more that I don't even know. So yeah, great point. And good question that we can add to our list here of things to cover from David. Is there a general overview of AI used in development? So yeah, like starting big picture and drilling down to some specifics. And in fact, maybe that's a great. I know that we've got a lot more from Eric specifically and his team in terms of. I'm going to start probing more about like, well, what upskilling meant to your team, Eric. But just because this brought up, David brought this up in a question here. Maybe we could set the stage with some of these, general overview of AI and what does that mean? What does this key term mean? So I could talk a little bit about our key terms just to set the stage. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds good. I know that during the training we did, the kind of definition of what AI is compared
Mhm.
to machine learning and large language models really helped my team understand how to use these products better.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's do this. And we've got again, I'm actually really excited because we've got some experts in the rooms, sevens and eights, and then again, if you're anything like me, your number is probably going to shift daily or weekly as new tools come out, and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this was a thing. So let's and we've got good interactions in our chat. So for everyone feeling brave, I'm going to give us a little mini exercise in the room here, and then I'll probably stop sharing my screen after this exercise so we have just some face-to-face time as we hear about Eric's programs. But for our group here, get your chat fingers ready. I've got a list of 6 key terms in the world of AI here. I've got deep learning, machine learning, large language models, artificial intelligence, generative AI, traditional machine learning. These actually nest within each other. There are some terms in this list that encompass everything that you see, and there are some other terms that are subsets of each other here. So anyone, let's see if we can collectively take some guesses at which of these terms are the broadest and which of the ones are the narrowest. So if we started on the outside most layer, the biggest umbrella term that covers everything else under this, out of these 6 options, what do you think is the biggest option? Yep, D's artificial intelligence. Yep, absolutely, right? So biggest, broadest, and this is going back to David's question of like, hey, can we start, big picture about where we are and kind of dial in. So AI, right? It's in our title for this talk. Exactly, safe spaces here, right? And it's okay to make the wrong guesses too. Please, please feel free to throw things out because those are going to get harder. So broadest umbrella here, artificial intelligence, a branch of computer science. When I think about AI in all of its different forms, one of the things that I really like using at this level is the example of like self-driving cars, right? Because there are so many different AI systems in something like a self-driving car. There's robotics, there's computer vision, there's algorithms that are determining traffic patterns, and there are algorithms for mapping systems. Million different subgroups being incorporated into that one piece of technology. But yeah, artificial intelligence has the broadest brushstroke. We're going to start to get a little harder now. What is the next layer down? One layer deeper into the onion here. We got B's. Okay, Deborah. Yes, absolutely. We got a smart group here. Machine learning is next. Yeah, and we got some guesses. Good. Keep guessing. Machine learning is the next kind of layer in, whereas some elements of artificial intelligence might be very basic, following patterns. So mimicking human intelligence maybe, but really just kind of following patterns. There is a very large set of within artificial intelligence that is all about programs that are learning to predict their own patterns from data that we give. So when you think about your recommendation systems for Amazon or for Netflix, Scott seems to like a lot of these action movies. I bet he's going to probably like this other action movie that just came out. Show watching, shopping, those types of recommendation systems are good examples of machine learning. Ooh, and a good question here. Predictive text equals machine learning? We will find out. Good question. Yes, not sure how you differentiate between machine learning and traditional machine learning. Great question from David. And that's kind of the next, and I often will give this as a gimme. Traditional machine learning in machine learning, you're right. They're probably more of a single definition. And typically the reason I show this in layers is because if on one side of machine learning is traditional machine learning, what do you think? So we've got artificial intelligence, machine learning, traditional machine learning. We got three more terms. What do you think is the on the other side of traditional machine learning? What would be the next layer down? Yeah, we got a very smart group. Deep learning, right? So if traditional machine learning is much more about decision trees, I'm going to follow this past random forest models, statistical models, if you've heard those types of things. A little bit, I think if any computer scientists are in the room, they're probably going to bristle if I say simpler, because that's not really fair. But maybe traditional machine learning, I could say, is a bit more explainable. I could open up the hood and kind of see, like, how did you get to that decision? Deep learning is referring to the deep, refers to the depths of layers of a neural network. And all of a sudden we have a model now that is mimicking the neural connections of a human brain. So much more of a networked approach and harder to track. Well, how did you exactly get to that process? Something like voice recognition technology like Siri or Alexa is more of a deep learning approach. All right, next layer in, we've got two terms left. There's generative AI and then there's large language models. Interesting. Now we got a little bit of differences here. So many votes for C, some votes for E. Interesting. The next layer in is actually generative AI, because when we think of generation, that type of generation could be text, could be video, could be imagery, could be artwork. All sorts of things are now getting generated by the technologies we're seeing today. And then last but not least, the reason we nest large language models at the very, very core of this is because this is a specific type of generative AI that specializes in conversational human-like text, that's trained on call and responses, that is trained to respond in a conversational tone. Yeah, so a great question. So I thought these more two distinctive categories. I've seen them more described as overlapping, but again, the technology is changing so quickly. The other thing that I will say is, oftentimes when you look at a single tool or a piece of technology, this is not, I can only pick deep learning or I can only pick traditional. These are often used in conjunction and collaboration with each other. So that was a lot of stuff right there. Eric, I know you mentioned that when we kind of covered this in our initial workshop with your team, yeah, this helped kind of level set and open eyes. But yeah, thoughts on this or things that you would add that came from your discussions?
I found that ultimately this helped me and my team set expectations of what the products could do for us. You can't ask a large language model to kind of interpret and understand things at the same level as machine learning, or like the one in blue rather than the traditional one. It doesn't have that same capability. It's the same like generative AI versus large language models. They're fairly similar things, but large language models really do focus on language and on how to answer or give context to something in a very clear way. Whereas generative AI, working with imagery, working with videos, it's a different task that you're expecting out of it. So you need to design your prompts differently, and you need to have different expectations of what you're going to get out of it. We use Vyond's AI tool, and we also use Pictory. Both are for creating video. And we have learned there's very detailed ways to get what we want out of those softwares. And each one has their own kind of settings in the background that kind of promote or restrict different things as well.
Great description. Yeah, and it's so interesting that even in just daily conversations, I will still catch myself using AI when I really mean the term AI, when I really mean large language model or machine, and it's kind of have to, oh yeah, it's actually really important to think about what I'm trying to point to and not only the technology, but the outcomes that I'm trying to get. Like, oh yeah, I want to extend the conversation, or I need to create versus I need to sort. Creation and sorting between categories, very different things. I'll stop sharing my screen. For those on the call, I'll make sure that we have, again, this is being recorded, so you can have that access to that image. I know folks have sometimes reached out to me saying, can I just get just that screen? You'll have access to all of these things. But now that we've kind of set the stage and, some of the categories and key terms and topics we'll be talking through, I'd love to jump more into a conversation with Eric and specifically learn about your team. And in fact, I'd love to hear about Good Roads as a company in general. So Eric, I'll, kind of give you the stage to say, tell us a bit about your company, your team, what you guys do, and then the challenges that led to you reaching out and saying, hey, can you give us some workshop stuff on AI?
Yeah, sure. So Good Roads is a municipal nonprofit association. We're mostly concerned with the quality and design of roads in Ontario. We've been devoted to the cause of better roads since 1894, 130 years now. Our members include most of Ontario's municipalities, a growing number of First Nations, and dozens of affiliated corporate members in the transportation and infrastructure sectors. Every government wants their roads to pay a return on investment in dollars, in connectivity, in performance, and we contribute to this by helping save billions in taxpayer dollars through better maintenance methods and materials, helping save lives through better road policy, helping municipalities effectively manage risk, bringing consistency to Ontario roads via a unified member training standards and qualifications, and by mitigating the environmental impacts of roads. And so generally we focus on training, advocacy, and research. So that's a little bit about our organization. Being 130 years old, there are a lot of things around this organization that are very out of date. I joined 4 years ago at the height of the pandemic, and basically I was given a department that was at least 20 years out of date in all methodology, had no digital training of any kind, and really needed to kind of work its way into the modern world. In the last 4 years, I've implemented an e-learning program. I've got 9 courses up and running and hope to double that by the end of next year. I've managed to get grant funding for our organization to help mitigate the risks of our digital programs, because there was a serious concern that our demographic wouldn't be interested in it. And a lot of what I've done in such a short period of time has been assisted by what I've learned about AI in the last couple of years. It's accelerated our development considerably. Now, when I talk about developing courses, I should clarify that I have an existing catalog of 70 courses. Those 70 courses, I'm trying to get the majority of them into an online format over the next several years. So I'm working with existing content and trying to transform it into another delivery format and upgrade how it's being presented to the students.
It's an interesting distinction. So, and again, these are great chats coming in. So keep them coming, folks. And and we'll pause really quickly, and I'll try to address questions as they come. Yeah, would Microsoft Copilot fall under large language model or generative AI? Certainly uses large language model components, specifically that call and response instruction prompting. It understands how to process a request, but I think the tools within Copilot, just like within GPT now, have expanded to what used to be just text response into now I can give you code, I can give you art, I can give you images, video. So I would say now it's expanded out to generative AI. And a question from Sarah that took the words right out of my mouth. So yeah, talk more about these 70 courses that you've got, Eric. So were they instructor-led that are going to e-learning? Was it content that needs to be updated? Is it the core content? Tell us about the updates.
So as most of you know, Canada's a rather large country, and so Ontario is huge. And if I'm doing instructor-led programming, I'm pretty much just covering 200-kilometer radius around our location. People don't drive too far to come to courses. Sometimes we'll get people from far away, but not too often, budget issues, etc. If I'm trying to train somebody in the far corner of my province, it could be over 1,000 kilometers away. They're not coming to my training. They're not getting the training they need to do their jobs properly. So we're not trying to eliminate our in-person training. I personally think in-person training is the premium experience. It gives these workers a chance to network with each other, Unlike a competitive environment like the private sector, municipal workers often call each other and ask for advice and help on things. So we need to create those networks.
Mm.
But for those that can't get to our training because they're too far away, because their budgets won't allow it, because they work night shift, because they're a small municipality and one guy does the job of 20 and one day away from work has a huge impact. This is why we need e-learning. It's a solution to a set of problems. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that as an organization, we're meeting the needs of all our members, not just those close to where our offices are. And because a lot, say 70%, maybe a little less of our learners are frontline workers, they're out in the field all the time. There was a belief in our organization for years that they would not be interested in sitting at a computer and learning. Over the last 3 years, I launched my first program 3 years ago. I have had something about 675 online learners in 3 years. Typically, we train 2,000 people a year. So that's a fairly sizable chunk that we've added. And that's in addition. None of our in-person programs have decreased in size. So it's just really providing more opportunities for people to get training of high quality and maintain their municipal infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're immediately connecting it. You know, I'm sure you did this right from the outset, but connecting it to specific ROIs and use cases. So if X person has to leave for a day to travel, you know, this represents a real bottom line lost productivity cost. And similarly, a similar ROI connector of we've grown, we used to have this group, which maybe was self-limiting in terms of can only get to, can only cast the net so wide. And now we have e-learning as an option, again, not as a replacement, like you said, but to expand our group. So now we can represent a X% growth in our learner base. You had a couple of questions on LMSs, which I know is a whole rabbit hole we could go down, but yeah, anything specific when you talk about LMSs with all of this?
Yeah, the LMS was our first step. Putting a basic technology stack in place made it possible to move forward with everything else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like many other things that we experienced, my organization was a little backwards in getting this set up. So we have an association management system that's not very good, and we're currently replacing it. That should have been done before we got an LMS so that we could create APIs, which are ways for the LMS and AMS to communicate and reduce our administrative load. But having the LMS in place made a big difference. There was some special considerations that I specifically had to take into account. Northern Ontario has a lot of issues with internet service, bandwidth, things like that. Products like Starlink are helping, but it's definitely an issue. So I wanted to avoid problems I've faced in the past when I worked in a lot of overseas jobs. Which was bandwidth destroying my courses. SCORM packages are large. They need to be downloaded in entirety before they can run. So if you have a large SCORM package you're running your course from, it can massively delay access to the course and really frustrate learners. So I build everything in HTML. I don't use any rapid authoring tools, which would be a lot easier. You got to know your demographic. You got to know who you're trying to serve. And I can best serve my members doing everything in HTML.
Interesting. Well, and I love, and this is a perfect kind of stepping stone. And keep these are great questions, by the way, in the chat. So keep them coming in. We'll get to them as we go. Yeah, and call out to those remote training areas. And again, kudos to recognizing that up front, especially when, as I'm sure all of us are sometimes prone to do, getting distracted by the shiny new tool of like, oh, but this is so much easier if I can just do this, and this just came out, and it's going to make it, like
that was me in my last job. I worked for a global health research organization, and I was doing e-learning in Africa, Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, Mozambique, and I wanted to use all the shiny new tools. I created something, I sent it over, and nobody could use it, or they'd be waiting 3 hours for the SCORM package to download. Other nightmares like that.
Yeah.
lessons learned, you know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, this is great. Again, and awesome questions coming in. Make sure that, and unless you really don't want to, for those chatting, use the drop down at the bottom and at that little blue button that says post this to everyone, because these are great questions. Sometimes they're going just to the hosts. But a couple that came in, and I'll use these questions that are coming in to kind of springboard into the next topic, which is one of the questions when we're looking at that key terms like onion layer is which of these layers is talking about prompting, and where does that fit in? And another question that might align with that is, how can I use AI to absorb this like massive new batch of courses that we're getting? And so I'm kind of curious, Eric, in your description of the journey. So talking about that initial tech stack, or that let's just get a basic learning management system, LMS, in place. Let's start to look at e-learning as an option or as an alternative to ILT, instructor-led training, but knowing that I don't want to just slap something together in an authoring course because it might drain my bandwidth. But now all of a sudden the next hot new thing is hitting the market as AI and large language. So you've now got this, you're now facing this new technology and probably getting some of these questions from your team similar to what others have. How did you start to look at AI as the next frontier?
So when I came in, I was essentially on my own. It was just me in the department, but as growth and innovation was a kind of mindset for the new executive director here, he let me start expanding the department. And I made a very concerted effort to choose people with experience and a bit of fearlessness, willing to play and try new things, learn new techniques. So I got them in place, and they just naturally on their own started playing with this new tool with AI. Didn't really know anything about it, but like a lot of us, we just got an account with ChatGPT and started typing things in and see what was happening. One of my staff, who is mostly focused on the e-learning rather than the in-person operations, was the one playing with the most and getting some good results on trimming a little bit of time out of our content development. So instead of having to work a lot with our subject matter experts to either have them draft content or give us a lot of information we drafted and then they reviewed, they were able to work with the AI to draft some of that content. And then they got the idea that since we have existing content, a lot of it created a long time ago, 50 years maybe, and not designed by an instructional designer. So no learning objectives, no assessment strategy, etc. She started to see if she can feed the content into the ChatGPT and extract learning objectives, which would help us when rebuilding the course. So we could set a proper assessment strategy, etc. And this worked well. Every time she gave a set of learning objectives to the experts, they came back and said, yep, that's great, perfect, or that one needs to be tweaked a little bit, whatever. And as she played, she learned she could ask for it to set things at certain levels of Bloom's taxonomy and all of this stuff. And so we started figuring that there are ways to really improve this workflow of creating new content out of old content, essentially. How to identify something like learning objectives when they were never there before. This playing around and these kind of revelations within the team prompted me to decide we need some training. We need at least a baseline to understand what we're doing and what we can actually get out of this. A few webinars and things like that were attended. They didn't really do quite what I wanted. I was at a couple of conferences listening to speakers talk about AI, but it was too general. I didn't have any way to take action on what I was hearing. And this is when eLearning Brothers and I first started chatting. I noticed your advertisement for the AI IQ series, and I forget the name of the other one, which is more thorough, and I started to ask questions. And because I was lucky enough to have some grant funding that was not spent, I asked the grant admin to shift it over to some training for my team, and they happily allowed us to do that.
Very cool.
And it was that training that gave us the kind of clarity on where we could go next. And now we've built out a specific process that we're following every time we approach an existing course that's in person that we want to turn into a e-learning course. And most of the time it starts with what are the learning objectives, like any course, because I don't have any of that for these courses.
Interesting. That's so great. Thank you for kind of walking through, and hopefully, you know, as folks are listening to those steps, you know, that might be triggering more questions, or you might be thinking, oh, we're right there, or we're in step 2 right now, or I'm in step 0, but that's a good spot to go. I was taking some notes, and so I'll put them in. Just put them into the chat. But I love this idea of, you know, Eric, you're mentioning this, you know, well, what are some of the team skills that I need? And I love this distinction of, well, I want experience, which, you know, all of us want experienced teams, but I love how you said fearlessness too. And so especially this, because we're on such this cutting edge, people out there in this audience might be thinking, well, yeah, ideally I'd love someone with a bunch of AI experience, but it's really great that you called out, but also just fearlessness and the willingness to try and fail. Not that it replaces experience, but yeah.
This is exactly what I'm getting at. I knew I needed a team that could take chances, make mistakes, and not feel defeated. That we try to create an environment within our group that's, you know, every mistake is fine as long as you learn something from it. And if you're making the same mistake over and over again and getting the same result over and over again, then that's not good. We can't have that.
Right.
But if you make the same mistake a few times, but each time you learn something and it gets a little bit better, or better yet, you don't make the same mistake twice, then, you know, that's part of the learning process. This is what we're trying to get our learners to understand, is just because they do bad in one quiz doesn't mean give up. I can't do this. Right.
Yeah. A great point. Iwa here, design thinking in a nutshell, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, so that was perfect. And then I loved just what you were mentioning again, and for anyone out there who's kind of listed themselves as the 1 or 2 or 3 in terms of familiarity, that initial behavior, super low stakes, right? It's like, well, just go get a free account with a Claude or a Gemini or a ChatGPT and just start playing around, and just, you know, the lowest possible, especially if you've got that mentality of like, I'm just going to try it out and it's okay to fail. To, you know, very easy initial step. You don't have to start with a intensive training. You can just start to dabble and see what's out there. And then I put this in the chat notes too, but that early output, I love that you were able to see right away, oh, we're reducing our development time. This typically takes us, you know, whatever, 20 hours to adjust an old original course to a new one. But now I can drop in the content and I can say, you know, output some initial learning objectives, and that saves me a good chunk of time.
Although I'll jump in and I'll just repeat my mantra. Large language models, AI in general, you can't fully trust them. I have absolutely everything checked by my subject matter experts, even images, because, you know, we work in road infrastructure and we have lots of images with cars on it. You'd be amazed how quickly our learners look at an image and go, that is not a Canadian road. That is not the type of truck you'll see in Canada. That sign doesn't exist in Canada. Right? There's very specific things that you need to be aware of, or even content generation. It might be correct information, but it's related to how they build roads in Europe. Right? So everything has to be checked by a human. We talk about AI technology as a great assist, but we also talk about human ingenuity is a required partner.
Yep. Yeah, I love that point. And again, such an important point to kind of recognize where large language models and generative AI, which is all about, I'm going to take this thing and expand, where that fits in the design process. I don't want that at the very end when it's just throwing stuff in, you know, before a check, but, you know, prior to us me looking at it, maybe really helpful. There's some great questions that are coming up specifically to you, Eric. One being, did you have concerns at any point, maybe just first wading in, or even still, on inadvertently training GPT on proprietary content, or someone dropping in a whole course and you're like, oh, I don't want that going somewhere?
Yeah, when we first began dabbling with ChatGPT, I made sure my team had an understanding of the fact that as long as we've got a free account, they're going to use what we put into it to train their model. which means if we do put in something, let's say proprietary about how to build a road, it may show up in someone else's answer. So that was something we were concerned about, but for our specific case, there's 1,000 other people that know how to build roads, and it's not that proprietary. Only in very few cases would it be. But I very quickly realized the return on investing $20-$30 a month or something like that to move into a paid version where they specifically put in the agreement that they will not share that data for training the model was well worth the investment. Ultimately, a license for ChatGPT is just a couple $100 a year. It's well worth it. I have saved in time and effort. I have saved far more of my staff's time and money.
Great point. Yeah, good answer to the question. And then I know this kind of gets now into, maybe some of the workshop stuff we were doing, or the outcomes, or what you've done since working with ELB to do the workshop. But there's a question on, did you onboard your team to any specific set of tools, or are you starting to kind of now narrow in on, oh, here's how we use our GPT, or here's how we, I know that you've kind of since then actually taken this into, and you can have examples of, hey, here's how we actually built this course that generates, here's an example of how we've generated stuff almost from thin air.
So at the beginning, it was just playing around. And if we heard about a new product and we had time, we jumped in and checked it out, whatever it did. I saw in the chat someone mentioning using Midjourney. Midjourney's been around for a while, but it's one of many image generating options. And I just haven't got around to Midjourney. And many people consider it one of the best. It's, my team is exceedingly busy with their day-to-day work, so we don't get a lot of time to play, but we try to take opportunity when we can. We've played with ChatGPT, Cloud, and Google's whatchamacallit?
Gemini.
And then as we do things like we were already using Vyond for creating animations. Vyond introduced an addition to their product where you could drop in a script and their AI would develop a animation for you. You just had to answer about 5 or 6 questions about style and things like that. And then you wait about 5 minutes and it outputs a video with your script and a basic interaction between the characters, which at that point you could edit and improve if you'd like. Working with another partner, they introduced us to a website called Pictory. It's really great for creating intro videos. Essentially, it has access to a massive stock library of video footage. You drop in a script, it uses the AI to guess what stock footage would work best with your script, puts it together. Any section that you don't like, you can remove. If you think it's too long for that stock footage, you can shorten. We've even managed to get it to use stock footage of the Toronto City Hall to make it look more local. And this is just an AI product. So we do try to play around and look for things that are helping us, but a lot of vendors are coming out with this add-on to their product. We use H5P a lot for creating interactions, activities, and games in our courses. And they recently released a smart import feature. You essentially gave it the questions that you wanted to ask and the answers, and it would go through the different types of questions that it can create and would create examples of drag and drop and fill in the blank and crosswords and others that you could use with the questions you inputted, and you just chose which one you wanted, made a few edits, and popped it in your course.
That's great. I think people are really excited seeing this chat about like, wait, what was these tools? So I dropped in a couple of just that we've discussed. LLM/multimodal meaning text, image, art, video, all of these things, generative AI that we've discussed. So GPT, Claude, Gemini, Midjourney, Vyond, H5P, ELB Learning has an whole AI toolkit that does a lot of these. But to your point, like so many of these companies now are saying like, hey, this is, this can save developer teams like yours huge amounts of time to create something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
And
Well,
every one of them shaves time off my development process, which equals money, or more importantly to me, means a course gets out faster and the next one gets out faster and the next one.
yep. Yep, absolutely. Well, there's a couple other things I wanted to, if we've got time, to show people like, hey, here's an example of how this worked, because I think I can tell by the chat activity, people are really excited. But the other thing, and maybe you could decide which is better to talk about first. I'm curious if there were any lessons learned about kind of change management, or kind of creating that culture around either within your own team or for your stakeholders when they start hearing, oh, AI, I don't like this, or I'm getting nervous. Any tips that you'd give people about how to manage expectations, or that change fearlessness?
So I was lucky that I had already started building a team that was ready to jump into something new.
Mm-hmm.
So within my small department, change management wasn't highly necessary. We were ready to go. There were some challenges when working with my board of directors. They had concerns and issues, especially because in the municipal world, they have more legitimate issues with the privacy and other things that they need to deal with. But I had already spent 2 years establishing a track record of success and trust with them. So a lot of it was just taking time to explain what I was doing to protect privacy and proprietary information, and the checks and balances that were in place, that I wasn't just taking anything from the AI and putting it out there publicly. I was vetting everything.
Yeah.
I think some of the bigger challenge came with the other departments in my organization. A lot of them have not changed what they've been doing for a lot of years. They are uncomfortable with change. And it was really something where they were like, oh, yeah, I've heard of it, but, I don't want to learn something new. I don't want to deal with it. We dragged a bunch of them into the training we did with Josh, and it opened their eyes. When they started to realize what kind of time they could take out of their workload, this is when they really started to see things differently. And again, we went through really carefully with them about the idea of having licensed and unlicensed access to a GPT or something like that. What they need to do to put checks and balances in place, because, for example, our admin team will be using it for quite different things than we are. And get them to understand some of these issues. But we are ultimately a small organization, and we have an aggressive growth plan in place. And so I've been given a certain amount of freedom to just run with things that larger organizations would not have. So I can see in the chat, some people are mentioning things about, putting policies in place, etc. We have, unwritten policies in place rather than official policies, because it's a small team to control, and they're not going to go off in a lot of different directions. And so I think there's very different challenges when you get into larger and larger organizations. I mean, there's 20 of us, that's everybody who works here. My instructor base are all volunteers, so I don't count them in. I have an instructor base of 200 instructors, but they're not doing anything with AI.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And you're right that as orgs of different sizes think about scaling this out, it's interesting, even with the largest, orgs that I'm working with, it surprises me sometimes how this idea of an AI policy is still just kind of like just starting to get on their radar. So yeah, it's something that I have multiple conversations about. People are like, oh man, we need to, like, we're starting to get some of this, but we really need to get that policy. So, how do we start to create that? And yeah, some of the awareness raising work that you're doing, I think helps set the stage for that. And I love that, like, again, I know this is my own soapbox, but I love that you mentioned, again, starting with outcomes and ROIs in place. Like, hey, this is saving my team a huge amount of time. Like, it's one of the best ways to open the doors, right? Is like, hey, did you realize that this is actually going to be saving us a bunch of time?
Talking about the return on investment for the board of directors is the way to signal.
Way to go, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And even when I'm going to my executive director, who I'm very lucky to have, he's very open-minded, always looking for innovative solutions. But still, it often comes down to saying, this is where the money's at. I'm either going to save money in development, or I'm going to make more money because there's more courses out there, or whatever it is.
Yeah, makes sense. And just one of the other notes that I dropped in our chat there, for those kind of just starting to scratch the surface on this, it is interesting that we're talking, a lot of this conversation has been around internal development tools versus, we're going to put a chat bot right into here, and it's going to, any client or external facing partner is going to be able to interact with this chatbot. When you think about it from your legal team's perspectives, those have very different levels of risk, right? Oh, your internal team wants to speed up the dev process, and then a SME is going to review it after that. Awesome, way faster route probably, versus we're going to build up our own chatbot model, and then we're going to turn it loose on a public of hundreds of thousands. Yeah, I can see that being a lot longer road to take.
Yeah, and the chatbot thing, like I would love to have in all my online courses a teaching assistant, essentially. If someone is struggling with content, they can talk to the chatbot right there and then. But we can't do that with a chatbot that connects externally to the internet. It has to be just the course content, because sometimes what we want our municipalities to do doesn't necessarily line up with what others are suggesting be done, or it's not Canadian specific enough, or following our rules and regulations. So it's really important to consider how these things are going to be used, and if it is accessing knowledge from the internet to produce the answers, will you actually get the answers that you want?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Well, I know we've got just about 10 minutes here. I'd love to whet people's appetite or get them thinking for kind of the next stage in their own development. If you're willing to share some of the, example of some of the things you're able to build, that'd be great to see.
Yeah, just showing a course, it'll just look like any course that you've seen before. It doesn't really show off the AI too much. Recently, we were speaking at a conference on how we're using AI, and we built a course in 30 minutes live in front of the attendees. It was a course just on how to make the best peanut butter jelly sandwich in the world. And what I'd actually think would be great to show you, rather than that course that just tells you, different types of bread and different types of peanut butter, but the flow, the workflow that we're using.
Yeah.
And in the document that I'm going to show, there is a little QR code in the bottom corner. That was for the attendees to access our presentation and the document I'm going to show. It's still active. If you guys want to grab that stuff, you go right ahead and use that QR code, and you'll be able to see the presentation we gave and have access to this document I'm sharing right now. Yeah, so the learning strategy stuff is separate. We started off with a little bit about that. But what we really jumped into is with our courses, the workflow that we're using at the moment kind of follows this pattern. And these prompts are very light, simple prompts. We do go into more detail for a lot of the stuff we're doing, but they're definitely a good starting point. So we'll ask, very specifically, create 4 learning objectives using Bloom's taxonomy level number 2 or 3, depending on the course and what we're trying to get out of our learners. Then we tend to take the material we have. It could be PowerPoints. It could be PowerPoints with notes or transcripted presentations included. It could be additional PDFs, but we give it some content and we ask it to create a proper paragraph based on the following information, and then we drop that information in. And this can be something that is really point form sometimes, or just like brainstorming sentences, or it can be, we've recorded them doing their presentation and transcribed that recording. And so it's quite detailed.
Wow.
It varies quite a bit. And then it creates content out of that for us. Add-ons that we often put in here have to do with our demographics. So I do teach a lot of people that never finished high school. So I'll, for example, create a proper paragraph based on the following information. The paragraph should be written in a style no higher than grade 10 English. Just to make it really simple and easy for these learners to follow along. That same request also helps dyslexics and others when the language is simplified, or at least it does for me as a dyslexic myself. So this is how we tend to build out the base content. And then to create an intro or a summary for a module, we tend to feed it back the paragraphs that it created with a simple prompt, create a short and concise intro paragraph based on the following content. And we get, again, a nice intro to begin our course with. We'll often take that intro that's produced by, let's say, ChatGPT, which is what we're using the most, and ask it to adapt that intro paragraph into a script that can be used for an introductory video. And that's what we take over to Pictory to create a very simple intro video that gives us a little rundown of what they're going to watch in the course. More recently, we've actually changed our intros to be more along the what's in it for me style. So we put that into the prompt. Please create an intro that uses the style of what's in it for me, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right, to make it a little bit more effective. We end all of our modules with key takeaways and a summary. So the step 4 kind of covers how we extract the key takeaways by, again, feeding back the content that it helped us create. And then we do something similar with assessments. We'll feed it content that was created and say, create 5 multiple choice questions from the content that cover the key learning points. Again, when we expand on these, we'll often say the module learning objectives were A, B, and C. Please ensure that the multiple choice questions align with learning objectives and add information to help get more. And it can design any type of question we want. So we can ask it to do drag and drop, fill in the blank, or anything. One thing that is important to remember is all of these tools have something called a context limit, where its memory is only so good, right? It can't remember 3,000 pages of documents and give you any quality answer. It doesn't have that ability. Every license has a different context limit, essentially. Like you'll be given more and more memory the more you pay for. And so it's important not to overwhelm your large language model with a huge amount of contextual information, PowerPoints, PDFs, whatever, and ask it to give you a summary because it wouldn't have that ability. It'll forget things, and it won't know it's forgetting things.
Right. And to stay on that point, just like you were saying, what can be challenging is it won't know it's forgetting, and so it'll spit something out, but we sometimes call this drift. It will drift further away from what's actually helpful. And get back to your point about trusting but verifying, that's that point of, hold on, I can't just copy and paste this in and assume it's all perfect, but kind of double checking. This is a really great one pager, and I think folks are jumping into the QR code. And just to confirm, maybe what someone who rated themselves 1 or 2, I could literally open up ChatGPT and I could copy one of these sentences that says create 5 learning objectives using Bloom's taxonomy on making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or Manager 101, training, or something like that, right?
Yeah, and on the other side of this file, I'd point out this building prompt section. This is straight out of what Josh taught us from you guys at ELB. This was really helpful for us on a breakdown of how to really create a detailed and effective prompt. Now, we don't always go into this level of detail for a prompt, but I always use this when I'm creating my own GPT. By that, I mean I'm creating a specific version of the Chat GPT that has a certain understanding. So I have one that's an instructional designer. I've told it that it has a certain level of knowledge and experience. It has expertise in certain areas. And when I ask it questions, it's looking at it from the perspective of an instructional designer. But I've also gone as far as to create learning personas. I give it some of my demographic data and say, this is who you are. Then I feed it a course module and ask it, what do you understand? What don't you understand? Was this interesting for you? Did you find that it could apply to your job? Because I give it very specific demographic data. Now, this is not as useful as beta testing, but it does get my product closer to a good quality when I go to beta testing.
Perfect. This is excellent. And yeah, and thanks for that. I'll make sure Josh, VP of our VP of AI solutions, give him the shout out too. Yeah, great example. And yeah, good call back to the AI workshop that we're able to do with all sorts of folks. Okay, we're just coming. Thank you so again for sharing all of this stuff. We're coming up to the top of the hour, so I want to and thanks to everyone for posing questions as we go, so we can kind of address them live. But any other questions or concerns, ideas, sparks of insight that you want to drop in the chat? Do it now, so we have a chance to address it. Eric, we got one from David here. How would you feed demographic data? You know, like, is that something that you do in any of these courses?
So in creating a GPT, you're given a section where you can just write out all this information. I just kind of put it together in bullet points. In some cases, if it's a really common job, like have an equipment operator who operates a dump truck, I'll just let it go and check it out online. But I'll kind of narrow it down to make sure it understands we're talking about someone who lives and works in Ontario.
Yeah.
Maybe if in this case it's mostly rural communities, I'll make sure they know that.
Yeah.
And just try to build that out. Kind of explaining it so that it knows what learner persona I would like it to emulate. You can also attach things like resumes and skill sets, etc. So you can upload documents into the GPT's formatting area, or where you're doing the settings. So it does kind of set it up to be easy for you. You just need to be really clear on what you're telling it. If you just give it demographic data, but don't tell it you need to pretend to be this person, it's not going to do anything, right? So go through that kind of way of building a prompt that I showed before. Make sure you know the personas there, which is the demographics essentially, but also the goal and the role, what you want it to do, the context of it, and all of that.
This is great tips and tricks. You see, as folks will see on the screen here, this is the workshop that Eric was mentioning, and I know Kristen's got a message at the end here for those that are interested in it. Thank you again for Eric for the time here. I know that there's questions still coming in, so please do. I've got my email here. Eric and I know are in contact, so anything Good Road specific, I can pass over Eric's way. But anything else, we'd love to keep the conversation going offline too. And Kristen, any final things as we hit the top of the hour here?
We do have a special offer for the first 10 that say yes. At the end, you're going to have an exit survey, and it will ask you if you would like a 90-minute free consultation regarding AI and everything surrounding AI. Scott may be one of the guys that's in on that conversation with you, or we have other capable people out there. So please don't just automatically click the little X with that survey if you're interested in a free 90-minute consultation regarding AI from ELB Learning. Other than that, thank you so much, Eric, for your participation today. Good to see you, Scott, as usual, both of you. And yes, you saw the email addresses and they're saying, yeah, guys, please use it. Reach out to them, ask some questions, and they'll see exactly how they can possibly help you. Other than that, I think this is where we close and say goodbye and have a wonderful day. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks again, Eric. All right, well, take care.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Scott.
guys.
Thank you, Kristen, and everyone who attended. And as they said, reach out if you have any questions. I'm still a beginner in a lot of things, but I'm always happy to help and network.
All right, excellent. Me as well.
Thanks,
All right,
gentlemen.
see you, everyone.